So drug dealing Canadian nationals found guilty and get the death penalty in China. Let's talk about it. Okay, hold on. First of all, China? Y'all want to sell drugs in China and collect yang? What the f-? Secondly, okay, so are you guys just tough with the U.S.? So you're trying to play tough with your big brothers, right? But the rest of the world can take you for some little but you want to talk tough against the United States, who protects you? So the news was that an unknown amount of Canadian nationals were smuggling drugs in China or selling drugs in China. However, they got caught and convicted as drug dealers, and their penalty was death. Now, of course, the Chinese reached out to the Canadians and let them know about this, which the Canadians in return was like, oh no, send them back here. We can deal with it. Like, da-da-da. We'll give them, we'll prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law here in Canada. They are humans. They deserve better than being put to death for selling drugs. But the Chinese are like, well, see, over there, you guys slap people on the wrist and let them out a few years after. Over here, if they're selling stuff that's causing death or harm to Chinese nationals, their punishment is death. And we don't care who they are. That's what they get. Whether they're Chinese, Americans, other Asians, or Canadians in this case, their penalty is punishment by death. See, do you ever wonder why there's no massive height in drug overdoses in China, even though that's where the fentanyl is coming from 90% of the time? That's because if they're caught selling it there, their penalty is death. So when you hear Trump say, hey, if you're selling drugs that are killing people, you are a murderer, and in return, your penalty should be death. Why can't you guys agree with that? See, personally, I think it's a very, very big problem when 80% of American citizens know at least one person who's died from an overdose because of nasty, dirty drugs that's sneaking into this country that are clearly from another country. See, I'ma just leave with this. Don't drink and drive. Smoke weed and fly. If you snort coke, you're a joke. If you smoke crack, whack. You smoke or pop fentanyl, you're probably gonna go to hell. And if you sell it, you should definitely go to hell. For everyone else, stand with Trump when he say, every drug dealer, particularly fentanyl, death penalty is your only punishment. Make America safe.
Respecting the laws of any country you enter means accepting the consequences of any crimes you commit there. China's strict drug law aims to protect its citizens from harm, but it's a double-edged sword in my opinion. While they enforce this law domestically, China is also a leading producer of fentanyl, which is exported to other countries.
Andrew, we haven't been given a specific number by Global Affairs as to how many Canadians were executed in China last year. They're not revealing their identities publicly for the sake of the family's privacy, but they did, as you mentioned, speak out and condemn these actions. Here's a statement from a spokesperson at Global Affairs, Charlotte McLeod, who writes, Canada strongly condemns China's use of the death penalty, which is irreversible and inconsistent with basic human dignity. Canada repeatedly called for clemency for these individuals at the senior-most levels and remains steadfast in its opposition to the use of the death penalty in all cases everywhere. She adds that Canada continues to advocate for clemency for Robert Schellenberg and provides him and his family consular assistance. Robert Schellenberg is a key figure in all this. He has been in prison in China since 2014. He was at first given a 15-year prison term, and then 3 years later, his term was upgraded to a death penalty. This came shortly after Canada arrested Meng Wanzhou, who was the Huawei executive arrested in Vancouver in 2018. China at the time also retaliated by detaining Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor in China. They've since been released, but Mr. Schellenberg remains in prison. He is not among those who was executed in China last year. Foreign Affairs has confirmed that with us. Now, in the meantime, we also got a statement from a spokesperson at the Chinese embassy in Canada who tells CBC News China is a rule of law country. Whoever violates the law of China must be held accountable in accordance with the law. Drug-related crime is a severe crime recognized worldwide as extremely harmful to the society and will be faced with severe penalties in all countries. The facts of the crimes committed by the Canadian nationals involved in the cases are clear and the evidence is solid and sufficient. We urge the Canadian side to respect the rule of law and China's judicial sovereignty. Stop making irresponsible remarks. CBC News Network also spoke earlier today to Veena Najibullah. She's a vice president of research and strategy at the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. She's based in Vancouver. She tells us China has a 99% conviction rate, especially when it comes to drug-related crimes. They barely grant appeals or clemency, and they regularly sentence foreigners to death. Despite all that, this is still a surprise.
Well, it's a deeply troubling development. Execution of foreigners is extremely rare, even in the Chinese criminal justice system, which has 99% conviction rate and carries out more executions than any other country in the world. According to Amnesty International, in fact, China carries out more executions than all other countries combined.
Now, there's no specific reasoning as to why this uptick in Canadians executed in China. We do know there are about 100 still in custody there. But we do know that we've got a bit of a tariff war going on with the U.S. Canada recently tariffed electric vehicles coming in from the U.S., and China announced just a slew of tariffs against Canada as well, set to come into effect tomorrow, including, as Andrew mentioned earlier in the show, on canola. That is seen as a message from China to Canada not to align with the U.S. and their stance against China.
In my view, they should also hold those involved in drug production within China accountable.